Good evening, everybody. I think we're going to start now. We're very lucky that at least we're not having rain. It's a bit cold, but I think we can manage. Just to note, in Jerusalem it's 25 degrees Celsius, so I think they're having a slightly warmer Hanukkah. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the first PEI Public Hanukkah Menorah lighting and celebration of the 120-year presence of a Jewish community on PEI. We are fortunate that at least it isn't raining, and we thank you all for braving the cold weather. My name is Leo Mednick. I'm the current president of the PEI Jewish community. First, I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Abegoi Mi'kmaq First Nation. We thank them for sharing their island with us. Thank you, Speaker Levy, for graciously allowing us to set up this Hanukkah menorah on the grounds of the Legislature. We will hear from Speaker Levy of the House and also from the Honorable Dennis King, Premier of PEI. We will then hear from a member of our community, Dr. Joseph Glass, who will speak on the history of the Jewish community on PEI. This menorah is really the first public demonstration of our presence on the island, and celebrating Hanukkah is a great way to break the ice, so to speak. Hanukkah sometimes appears sort of like the end of December, so ice wouldn't be uncalled for. This is the first night of the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is more of a historical holiday rather than a religious holiday. Its history goes back to the year 140 BC, 2160 years ago. Israel was then part of the Syrian Greek Empire of King Ahasuerus III, who allowed the Jews to live according to their customs. Rules and situations changed, and under his son Antiochus IV, the Jewish people were oppressed, taxed, and efforts made to bring the Greek gods into the holy Jewish temple. Eventually, a group of rebels under the leadership of Judah the Maccabee fought the Syrians, and after 3 years defeated them and threw them out of the country. The first order of business then was to rededicate the temple and light the traditional 7-branched menorah. However, they could only find 1 jar of olive oil for the menorah, enough for only 1 day. Miraculously, the menorah stayed lit for 8 days. This was celebrated as a miracle, and so we now celebrate Hanukkah with an 8-branched menorah to celebrate that miracle. Hanukkah, called the Festival of Lights, is a fun holiday, celebrated by eating of potato pancakes or latkes, jelly-filled donuts called sifkaniyot, and playing games with a spinning top called a dreidel. My fondest memories are of me as a 9-year-old at family Hanukkah celebrations in Montreal with my parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Thank you for coming to this evening and celebrating it with us. I'd like to now call on Dr. Joseph Glass to introduce the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Colin Levy.
It is my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Colin Levy, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Prince Edward Island. Speaker Levy is a lifelong resident of Surrey and the MLA for Surrey Elmira. His hometown can boast of being the first town to acknowledge a Jewish presence. As early as 1898, Hebrew Street existed in Surrey. It was most probably named in honor of Hyman Jacobson, who operated a general store at the corner of Hebrew and Main. Starting in 1948, Surrey was the home of the renowned physician, Dr. Edward Kastner. He devotedly served the area, and for some 30 years, he and his wife, Irene, raised 3 children. I would like to introduce to you the newest Jewish family of Surrey. Where are they? The Litvak Mamashvili family, right over there. Deeply involved in his community, Speaker Levy is the longtime chief of the Surrey Fire Department and is a volunteer at the Eastern Kings Sportplex. Speaker Levy and his wife Shelley have 2 children, Sean and Natasha. Mr. Speaker, if you please.
Thank you, Joseph, for that great history lesson. Honourable Premier, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, members of the Legislative Assembly, invited guests, and the reason we're all here this evening, the Jewish community of Prince Edward Island. I did have an hour-long speech made up, but because of the cold, I just took one sheet out of the book. I want to welcome you all here this evening. I want to thank you for the invitation. What I understand is the first public menorah has been placed in PEI. As Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, I am pleased to offer the legislative grounds for this display in recognition of the 120th anniversary of the Jewish community presence on PEI. I want to wish all members of the Jewish community a happy Hanukkah. And I just want to put out there a few thank yous. I want to thank Joey Jeffrey, the clerk of the Legislative Assembly, for the work he has done on this. I want to thank Emily Duran for the work Emily put into this. I want to thank Joanne Holding, Joanne Callahan, and Barb O'Donnell, all the staff. A big thank you for the work that was put into this. A lot of work put into this. I want to thank especially Martin Root and Hannah Bell for bringing it forward, and especially the Legislative Committee, Management Committee. There was a lot of work done on this to make it happen, and we were right down to the wire, I think, Martin, but we definitely we made it happen. And by the looks of the crowd here this evening, it all worked out well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite the Honorable Premier Dennis King to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much. What a wonderful honor and opportunity it is for me to be here. Let me start also by recognizing the Honorable Speaker, Colin Levy, Peter Bevan Baker, Leader of the Official Opposition, MLA of the neighboring district of which I represent. Hannah Bell I saw here as well. In fact, it was Hannah who stopped me during a legislative session to say, would you come here for this event? And I have to admit that I thought maybe I had forgotten that I was here another year or something, and I said, yes, I would like to be here. She said, you know, it's going to be the very first one. And I thought, thankfully, I'm still functioning up here, but I certainly said yes, that I would be here, and I'm very honored to be here with you all. So let me first say good evening, bonjour, Kwei, and the very first public Hanukkah menorah on Prince Edward Island. It's a wonderful thing that we're celebrating here today, and I can't help but think and ask the very obvious question why it's taken us 120 years to do this. But I'm very glad that we can do this tonight. I thought it was important that I attend today's ceremony, not only because it's the first of its kind, because I do feel it embodies some of the things that we as Islanders care about the most, and that is the freedom of expression and the respect that we have for each and every one of us as fellow Prince Edward Islanders. As Islanders, we recognize our many diverse communities in Prince Edward Island, and I don't think that's ever been on greater display than it has been these last 21 months when we've had to endure so much. We've had to come together and thankfully learn so much about each other in that difficult time, and if there is a blessing in COVID, that is certainly one of them for sure. I think one of the attributes that makes our island so special and so strong is that togetherness. I think I've heard others refer to it as that islandness, that kindness that's inside each and every one of us, regardless of our religion, regardless of our color or sex, where we've come from. We're all proud to call Prince Edward Island home, and we're all fortunate to do so. Hanukkah, as we know, illustrates religious freedom, the right of people to unify and worship freely in their own way. And those of us who are learning a little bit more about this every day, it gives us a greater understanding of what you do, why you do it, and that process allows us to better understand and appreciate each other. The occasion symbolizes the power of community. What a better place to do that than Charlottetown and Prince Edward Island. And as I said, it's a perfect example of how Islanders can make things happen by coming together. And by putting up this very first public Hanukkah menorah on PEI, it's a symbol that our Jewish community is openly, freely, and safely celebrating their religious holiday today and for the next number of days. I'm honored to show my support for the occasion. I'm honored to speak on behalf of all the citizens of Prince Edward Island to be here tonight. 120 years since the first Jewish community on Prince Edward Island was established, and tremendous perseverance and contribution over all these years, both economically and socially. So thank you very much for that. And I know your community will continue to thrive here on Prince Edward Island. Finally, in keeping with the spirit of togetherness and support for our fellow Islanders, I call on the entire Jewish community to make and eat as many latkes as possible, because we know they're made, of course, with PEI, world-famous PEI potatoes, and what a better time to do that than now. So thank you very much. Happy Hanukkah to all.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you very much, Premier Dennis King. I'll do my best on the latkes, but I may not be able to eat as many as you'd like. I'd like to call on Dr. Joseph Glass to speak on the history of the Jewish community on PEI, a subject close to his heart.
Speaker Levy, Premier King, welcome guests, and fellow Prince Edward Island Jewish community members. I am honored to share a few insights into the Jewish community of PEI, and I'll focus on three themes: continuity, community, and diversity. As early as 1848, there was a Jewish presence on the island. Joseph Levy, a tailor by vocation, built Princetown, now Malpeque, his home for at least 13 years. Very few Jews lived in PEI during the second half of the 1800s. In 1891, Dr. Frank Rawson was the only Jewish person enumerated in the census. In the 1890s, a few Jewish men peddled and some ran small businesses. For example, Philip Goodstein operated the New York Cheap Store just across the road where the DVA is today. I wonder if Philip could have imagined back in 1898 that the Jewish community would be dedicating a Hanukkah menorah on the grounds of the provincial legislature. By 1901, over 20 Jewish people lived on the island. This marked the beginning of our permanent presence. By 1914, the population increased to around 45 due to migration and natural growth. However, between the two world wars, the Jewish population declined due to outmigration. During and after World War II, a few Jewish physicians who had fled Nazi persecution reached Canada and settled in PEI, including Dr. Sidney Bandler of Alberton, Dr. Israel Rackman in Charlottetown, and Dr. Edward Kastner in Surrey. The 1970s saw increased Jewish migration. A few engaged in farming, while others were employed in higher education, government, health services, and the literary, visual, and theatrical arts. By 1981, approximately 90 Jews resided here. The census estimate for 2016 was 215, although it's not exact, who are Jewish ethnically. In addition, there's an annual influx of Jewish summer visitors who connect with the permanent residents. Over the past 120 years, there's been a continuous Jewish presence. The population grew tenfold due to migration and some natural growth. Most Jewish communities have basic institutions, a synagogue and a cemetery, but PEI has neither. Some Jews who passed away here were buried in consecrated Jewish cemeteries in St. John, Moncton, and Halifax. Another benchmark for a community is the availability of a minyan, a quorum of 10 men. Laser Rappaport, who arrived and settled in Southport in 1929, left shortly afterwards. He could not find a regular minyan needed to say the mourner's prayer following his father's death. This is not meant to imply that the Jews on the island do not celebrate Jewish holidays and do not pray together. The Jewish residents were recognized locally as a group beginning in the 1900s. For example, the Patriot newspaper in 1908 reported Charlottetown's Jews were celebrating Passover and consumed unleavened bread for 8 days. The Dukoff-Hoffman nuptials were front-page news on The Guardian in 1913. A rabbi came from St. John to perform the marriage ceremony. Over time, we started to organize a Jewish community, and that began in the 1970s. Dr. Joseph Naylor was the driving force behind it. In 1982, he began publishing a newsletter called PEI, which is Hebrew for the island, which was initially distributed among 40 families. In 1993, the PEI Jewish community was formally established, and Dr. Joseph Naylor was elected its president. The community gathers together to celebrate Jewish holidays and other activities. The Jewish community lobbied for provincial recognition of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. The PEI legislature passed Bill 104, the Holocaust Memorial Day Act, in 1999, and annually the community organizes a Yom HaShoah event. The Jewish population diversified over the years. Early residents were from mainly Eastern and Central Europe. The current residents include Jews born on the island and those who came from other parts of Canada, from the States, Israel, Brazil, Argentina, England, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and South Africa, and probably more. The community also brings together different Jewish cultural heritages, Ashkenazim, Sephardim, and Mizrahim, and observances, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Cultural, and more. To summarize, there has been a continuous Jewish presence here on Prince Edward Island for 120 years. The Jewish community continues evolving, growing, and diversifying. Today's dedication of our Hanukkah menorah is another step in the evolution of our Jewish community. Shortly, Amalia and Eli will recite 3 blessings. The third blessing is called the Shehecheyanu. It is said only on the first night of Hanukkah, thanking God for granting us life, sustaining us, and allowing us to reach this occasion, the celebration of the Festival of Lights. This year, when reciting the Shehecheyanu, let us also recognize this momentous occasion. The public lighting of the Hanukkah menorah on the grounds of the Prince Edward Island Legislature, as well as the continuous Jewish presence here for 120 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We're looking forward to when you finish your book and get it published.
It will be.
Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, and tonight we light the first candle, or in this case, the LED light. And on each subsequent night, an additional light is lit until all 8 lights are illuminated. Note that the extra taller light in the middle is called the guardian or shamash light, and it's the candle used to light the other candles when using wax candles. There are 3 blessings made when lighting the candle on the first night. After that, we will sing a couple of Hanukkah songs. We have distributed translations to the prayers and songs. I would like to introduce Amalia Horsting Barbosa and Eli Litvak Marmalashvili, 2 children in our community, to lead us in the blessings and songs. Could you folks come up?
شانو بنتوبان بتبانو لدلكنن شهنوكان Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לעודנו בימים ההם ובזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. מעוזו ישועתי והנאה שפע תיכון בית תפילתי ושם תודה משמח ותחי מטבח ויצר המנגח אז אדמור בשיר מזמור חנוכת המזבח אז אדמור בשיר מזמור חנוכת המזבח סוף 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 חנוכה הוא הטוב חנוכה הוא הטוב סביבו סוף 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 סביבון סוף 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 חנוכה הוא הטוב חנוכה הוא הטוב סביבון סוף סוף סוף.
Very good. Thank you, Amalia and Eli. That was beautiful. I want to thank you all for attending the menorah ceremony. The menorah is programmed to add an additional light each evening for the full 8 days, if I programmed it right. I'd like to call on Martin Root to conclude.
You know, I'm very used to speaking publicly, but I am so moved tonight. This is beyond for me. Thank each of you for coming. About a year ago, my wife said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could have a menorah in a public place on the island? And I thought, what? No, that's impossible. We can't, but no, perhaps we could. And then this thought popped in my mind. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes an island to raise a community. And what each of you have done this evening has been just incredible for me and for the entire Jewish community. First of all, to Speaker Levy, thank you, sir. I know this was a precedent-setting, as Joey, thank you, the clerk. You know, this was precedent-setting. It's never been done on the island before, but you had the courage to say, yes, let's do it. And yes, both of you. And the Premier, you stole my thunder in terms of your speech. You just said, yes, I'll do it, when Hannah asked you. As quickly and as simply as that. Your last line about the latkes, we've got to eat a lot of latkes, folks, to support the potato farmers on this island. And I also want to recognize Hannah Bell. When I came to her with this idea a year ago, she said, Martin, we're going to make this happen. She set up the meeting with the speaker and the clerk. She met for myself and Leo, and she spoke with the Premier, asking him to come. So thank you. And Clerk Joe Jeffries, thank you so much. And especially our two little lovely children, not mine, our children, Amalia and Ellie, thank you so much. And all the committee, the President Leo Mednick, thank you, Leo. Joseph Glass for all the historical background. Speaker, you've got to connect with Joseph Glass. He knows, I know you're a history buff, and he loves this stuff. To Shamara, to Leslie Sachs, to Winston McGregor, Raphael, Nicole, and Elena Clyde. The other thing I want to thank is all the partners and spouses who had to put up with all the stuff that we've done for the last several months to get this thing done. So it does take an island to raise a community. Thank you everyone for coming. I do want to speak to the speaker, the Premier, Joey and Hannah. For 2 seconds, I have a little gift for you. We have planted in your honor in Israel 5 trees, which is a very big deal in Judaism because when the Jews came back to Israel, it was the desert, and there was, as I remember as a kid, just planting trees to regreen the entire country. And so we've planted trees in your honor in Israel. Thank you, everybody. It does take an island to raise a community. Thank you. Chag Sameach. Happy Hanukkah. You want to say anything? That's it. Good night.
Drive carefully. Get warm.